Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, people of all ages, welcome back to the Sticky Floors podcast. I am one of your hosts, Speed, and tonight I'm joined by Tyrone. Now, well, this is CJ. I'm joined by Mr. Will. I'm talking about Speed and Tyrone because tonight we are talking about Hollywood Shuffle. And if you have seen the movie Hollywood Shuffle, you know that there's a skit about what is it called? Brothers critiquing movies,
Yeah,
and it's featuring Speed and Tyrone. So we're gonna talk about that movie. I know that this was one of your selections, Mr. Will.
yeah,
Why don't
man.
you just kind of give people an overview of it because this is a movie that came out in 1987. It's a long time ago. Relative, depending on who you are, it was a long time ago. Some people may not be familiar with this movie at all, but this is an important movie in this month of Black movies that we're talking about, celebrating Black History Month. And Hollywood Shuffle has a lot of very important themes to Black people. So if you can just let everybody have like an overview of it, and then we can start to chop it up.
Yeah, man. Thank you for that brilliant introduction, CJ. Speed.
Speed.
We're talking about this 1987 film by Mr. Robert Townsend. Uh, it's almost autobiographical, you would say, as Robert Townsend, like Bobby, in that's the character he plays. For those that don't know, is a very talented and ambitious entertainer who's trying to make his way in the world with thoughts of stardom and being a great actor or thespian rather. Um, and like Robert, he has found himself in a very compromising position. Maybe not to the same degree as Mr. Townsend, but nonetheless one where he questions whether or not he's doing the work that he aspires to do. Um, as you know, Mr. Robert Townsend would go on to not only direct but produce a number of influential shows that you probably don't even recognize are influencing your favorite show. It's almost like that phrase of your rapper's favorite rapper. Um,
Hmm.
so, with
Yeah.
respect to that, you're talking about a movie and just the title alone that highlights the and speaks to the demeaning process that actors must go through in order to obtain their roles that they play. You're speaking to a discussion about foolishness and a single-mindedness that a, a, a fair amount of producers still continue to see blacks with respect to having limited roles in Hollywood and on the TV screen. There's a multitude of intentional, idiotic skits. There's fantasy
Mhm.
sequences, staged auditions, commercials that are part of basically a gag reel. You have even the traditional domestic scenes. Your obligated slavery scene slash butler scene. Um, just basically the stereotypical roles that black people were supposedly only able to play. Hollywood Shuffle is a movie that's so full of promise and hope for future generations who happen to be any type of so-called minority, where they can see themselves in the very diverse group of individuals who come together. Who, mind you, they were in things with Mr. Townsend as well as on improv and uh, just a host of other things that where you may say, I don't remember that guy's name or I don't remember her name, but I know them by face because they're such talented character actors, as the little colloquialism is used in the film. To surmise, you're dealing with an individual who is the eldest of two brothers, raised by a single mother, who also has their maternal grandmother under the same roof as them, which also kind of echoes Robert Townsend's life as well, where he was raised in a quote unquote single family home as well in Chicago. In this case, Bobby's raised in what I can surmise is LA.
Hmm.
But nonetheless, you're talking about a major urban US city that's heavily populated by black and brown people. Nonetheless, I think this movie speaks to not only the heart, determination, and grit that we so called have to quote unquote pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, but as CJ reminded me earlier in the pre production meeting, this is in essence the symbol of Kujijagalia, self determination, which is widely predominant in Kwanzaa.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Thank you for that intro, for that comprehensive intro, not only about the movie but also about Robert Townsend. This is you talked the last thing you said there was about the idea of self determination. When I remember watching this movie like years and years and years
Mhm.
ago, I didn't realize how much Robert Townsend used Hollywood Shuffle as kind of the foundation for the other things that he would go on to produce.
Right, right.
So, like the character in this, Bobby Taylor, is wrestling with this idea of I want to play roles that matter. I want to run the spectrum of what acting is. I don't want to just be a pimp or a slave
Mhm.
in cinema, right? And then Robert Townsend goes out and he creates the roles and the films and the stories that give that width
Yep.
of and depth to the idea of acting, which is amazing because this is Robert Townsend. He makes Meteor Man, right? Black superhero, which is a reference to this movie. He makes the Five Heartbeats,
Yep.
which five character. I mean, amazing story. Everybody loves the Five
Classic.
Heartbeats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there a heart in the house tonight? Like we all, like
Eddie Kane
everybody,
Jr.
and it came. You know what I'm saying? You can't sing like me. Like everybody knows that that's like a classic movie, but it's so much depth, and he gives you the depth of like five black male characters going through this evolution process of becoming, superstars and what happens to them. Then he gives you the Parenthood, which
Mhm.
is like kind of a modern day version of the Cosby Show, but
Yep.
like a very like grounded, down to earth, like black family sitcom with
Yeah.
positive images and all those things associated with it. And all of these things are what he wanted to do with Hollywood Shuffle and what he was talking about with it. So it's amazing. It's like you said, it's Kuji Chakli, it's self-determination. He went out and said, I'm gonna define myself for myself instead of being named and defined by someone else.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy about that though, CJ? If you check out the credits just alone, you're talking about a man who gave Beyonce a chance to act before she was Beyonce. So you're talking about Carmen, a hip opera. I
Which I
mean,
loved.
which
which
that's what I'm
which I
saying. That's
loved.
why that's
Yeah.
why I reference it, because these are things that like they fly under the radar, but you don't understand the hidden hand and the process behind it. Like everybody wants to be in front of the camera, but there's so many
Mhm.
roles behind the camera, whether it's key grip, even the tax accountant or the caterer, the individuals in charge of the lighting, stagehands, you name it. It's not just the producer and the director and the screenplay. No, there's countless of other jobs that I was watching this documentary about black cowboys and how their influence became
Mhm.
into stuntmen, and that how there's a ranch out in California owned by black folk, and they rent out their horses to use in a lot of movies that you wouldn't even think of. Um,
Yeah.
but getting back to Robert Townsend, I just want to run down this real quick, just so for the folks that at home or watching us on YouTube aren't aware of. You're talking about he's directed everything from Bill Cosby 77, like you said, the Five Heartbeats. You mentioned the superhero movie Meteor
Meteor
Man.
Man.
But
Mhm.
for those that are into DC, he's also directed and performed in Black Lightning, which was on the
Mhm.
CW, a
Mhm.
modernized take of a black superhero. Then you got American Soul, Wonder Years, which everyone knows about, but this is the more modernized version. Um,
Yeah.
Kaleidoscope, you mentioned it to me, The Bear. And for those that are like me and CJ, he's directed uh, a couple of episodes of Power Force with your man Tommy, who everyone
Mhm.
says gets an invite to the proverbial barbecue. I mean, like, uh, oh, shout out to Jason Sikora. So, like, also got to remember too the Little Richard movie. Since you want to talk about individuals playing biopic singing roles, he's produced Little Rich. Excuse me, directed Little Richard. He's directed Bapes. That's the Halle Berry movie where they had the
Mhm.
weird, funny hair,
Yeah.
and even
Raps.
though it
Yep.
was clown, but you could see the diversity in the projects he's chosen to be hands on with. So it's almost
Mhm.
very meticulous and also scripted in such a way where it shows his diversity to be able to navigate. Hey, I can do this, I can do that, I can specialize in certain things, I can bring on young talent that maybe wouldn't get a shot elsewhere. And we can also break new ground in these new avenues and these new spaces where we've been typecast that we don't normally participate in. So, major kudos to him. Which also I got to give a shout out to Mr. Byron Allen, media mogul, attempted to purchase Black BET, Black Entertainment Television. They kind of work in tandem, where maybe not tradition in the traditional physical sense, but in the sense of figuratively, where like we're talking about right now, giving flowers, giving praise to individuals who go under the radar that are very influential in the culture, as we say, again, as another colloquialism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this in the case of, what Robert Townsend is doing with this movie is really, he's asking that age-old question, who gets to control the image of black people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's doing that in film, right? In film, he's saying who gets to control the image of black people, and it's intentional that the writers and the people that are getting to decide who's going to be actors in this movie are all white people, right? Because that it's telling you without like being so heavy-handed about it, although the movie can be heavy-handed in some parts, that at this time in 1987 there's not that level of control of the black image to the extent that it is today. And I think, one of the things we will talk about a little bit later is what's kind of happened since this movie. But this is an important concept of who controls your image, because whoever controls the image controls how you're going to be seen, not only in America, but also across the whole world.
Globally,
Right.
yep.
And this movie, like in talking about the cultural, how it influences other things. I mean, this is a precursor to movies like Bamboozled, Spike Lee's Bamboozled, which, also deals with the idea of how people are seen in television and
Mm-hmm.
what does it mean to be a minstrel or modern day minstrel show. You have a Living Large with T.C. Carlson, which also deals with this, which is a great like little comedy about a brother who gets on a news network and is wrestling with identity as a result of that. This also even gets like Brown Sugar, which we talked about
Yep.
before with Tay Diggs, Mos Def, Queen Latifah, Sanaa Lathan, and this idea of like hip hop music, the authentic hip hop, and then like as juxtaposed against the hip hop Dalmatians and things
Yeah.
like that. And then, most recently, there's a movie that just came out this last month, American Fiction, which has
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey Wright in it, and then deals with this idea of who controls like what is defined as black when in literature. So this there's a continuum of what Robert Townsend is doing from this movie, but this movie Hollywood Shuffle, this is part of the foundation.
Oh no,
And
no, definitely, most definitely.
yeah, it's part of the foundation, and it's something that, as a result, it's an important movie to just discuss, and it's an important movie to talk about, right?
Oh yeah, and I think the thing to piggyback on that is you got to remember in '89 Denzel wins the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. That's 2 years
Hmm.
after this movie, which also
Hmm.
speaks to the credible roles that black people were looking for at that time. And if you think about from Dorothy Dandridge to Sidney Poitier to Denzel, you're talking about 50 years in that
Yeah.
span. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like that's not chump change. That's some people don't even live 5 minutes, obviously, but 50 years, that's a human being's lifespan. I mean, and then when you compare and contrast that to, there's an interview with Toni Morrison in which she speaks to the topic the topic of black readers under white gaze. That speaks to American
Hmm.
fiction, where
Hmm.
um uh Tyler Perry even speaks to it. He says something to the effect, and obviously I'm paraphrasing, that he doesn't look to seek a ringing endorsement from the mainstream. He doesn't make pictures for them, just like they
Hmm.
don't make pictures for us. So therefore, it's a non-issue. It's a non-starter for him. So when he's making a Medea, which keeping it 100, I hate that entire series, and I don't like seeing black men in dresses, but that's just me. Um, I just look at it to the effect of there's still an audience for that. They may not uh like the caricatures that are portrayed
Hmm.
on screen, but it's what's beneath the surface where it speaks to them. Where you may have a matriarch in charge of your family who's very domineering and very boisterous and opinionated. You may have an uncle who's down on his luck, always borrowing a dollar from somebody, and is very on the stoop all the time. You know what I mean? You may have a up and coming cousin who's very intellectual and trying to get out and make something of himself, and he's ambitious in that regard from an academic standpoint. So these movies, these shows, these plays, even though they're not for everyone, that also speaks to Black people, because we're not just this monolith and everyone thinks the same, this cookie cutter. Like, even between us, the I'm pretty sure those that have watched us know that the reason why I feel that this works is that CJ and I complement each other in a way that will speak to later on our popcorn scale. That, it may
It
clash
might
here and
one of
there.
us might like something. Yeah, one of us might not. Yeah,
Hmm.
it absolutely works. And I think it's val. Movies are art, right?
Hmm.
And art has to at some level be. It has to be able to be
Hmm.
whatever it is and be subject to the interpretation of someone else.
Yep.
You and I may watch the same thing and get something completely different out of it. And that might be different than what the director even meant by it
Hmm.
altogether. And that's fine. And even whether the director is Tyler Perry or whether it's Spike Lee, or in this case whether it's Robert Townsend, they have this space to create something that speaks to some part of the idea of what this world looks like from their
Hmm.
perspective. And if it works for you, then you like it. If it
Right.
doesn't, you don't like it, right? But
Hmm.
that doesn't negate the value of it, because it is resonating with someone somewhere.
Yep.
Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? So this movie resonates because it is telling a relevant story
Hmm.
about identity and what happens. And let's keep it real. Like, they did this themselves. This movie
Yeah.
was made on $100,000 budget. They
Yep.
financed it themselves on
Hmm.
credit. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it went on to make $5.2 million. And in that sense, it kind of gave Robert Townsend the green light to move forward with his career and to create some of the other visionary things that he was able to do. Now the question becomes, what happened, right?
Mm.
And so, like, we talked about this before, and I think it's important to just reference this here. And this is my perspective. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. Robert Townsend has always been a champion of Black movies, Black television, and in making sure that certain stories are told.
Hmm.
And I remember years ago, there used to be a movie called The Spook Who Sat by the Door, based
Hmm.
on the book, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, which is made by Sam Greenlee. The book is fantastic, by the way. The movie is very, very hard to see. It was actually released in movie theaters,
Mm.
and it was in theaters for 2 weeks before it got taken out, because
Limited.
anyone who's ever right, limited release, limited engagement. Anyone who's familiar with the book or the movie knows it is probably one of the most revolutionary pieces of film created in terms
Mm.
of telling a story of a Black person truly fighting against the system from
Right.
within
Right.
and outside the system, right? They got rid of it really quickly. Robert Townsend was instrumental in bringing it back to even DVD quality, because for a long time it could only be found on video, right? And I
Mm.
remember in college somebody had the video, which is how I was able to see it. It
Got
became a DVD. Now I don't even know what happened to it since it became a DVD.
you. Mm.
But after that point, he did a lot of things, but I think the spotlight on him as the creator, to me, kind of diminished, because, like I said, I think that movie in particular challenges so many of the ideas of what you can do and the stories that you can tell in Black cinema, in a way that there's nothing else that I've ever seen that's even close to it that's been produced at that scale. And now, like, the average person probably doesn't is not familiar with Robert Townsend, or doesn't even know all of these things that he created that are the foundation for so many things that we love and see now.
Well, I think that's the point, CJ, that not only this platform as a whole is trying to highlight, but also individuals as young as our children and even younger. You have a lot of musicians right now where they don't even need a record label, and they're able to promote their own art, their own material, via all of these streaming platforms. Now, the pros to that are, hey, they're constructive, they're taking the bull by the horns, or the proverbial reins of the horse, and they're out there and they're doing it. They're they don't even go to school. They say, hey, I don't need the classroom. I want to be an entrepreneur. This is the avenue for me to utilize in order to bring that to fruition. The con is some of these individuals, they need some seasoning. They need an A&R. They need
Mhm.
someone to harness that talent, put it in focus, and actually help finish the product. Um, but then you say to yourself, okay, well, you got these labels, a la, uh, Def Jam, Columbia, Geffen, all these entities. They only want to deal with these people after they've already established themselves. So, say they
Mhm.
have 50 billion trillion spins and they have 500 million followers. Well, at this point, I don't need you. I'm
Mhm.
generating an income on a monthly basis, weekly basis that's more than sufficient. I have the individuals like you take a Ryan Leslie. He's broken it down to where, hey, if I just focus on my core audience, give them the special invites where they know on the meet and greet and they can get a package. So it's more about purchasing an event, an environment in which is conducive for a truly interactive experience between the artist and the
Mhm.
consumer. Now we're
Mhm.
talking about what Robert Townsend has tried to usher in not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, 30, 40, 50. I mean, this guy was in Cooley High in 1975. So you're
Yeah.
talking about someone who was ambitious enough to say, "Hey, at a young age, I want to be on the silver screen. I know I can bring my dreams come true, make my dreams come true. I can be a producer, an actor, a writer." That is mimicked in this show of Bobby Taylor looking after
Mhm.
his younger brother helping him with his lines in the bathroom, the
Great scene. Mhm.
the adulation that he's getting, and his mother being supportive. There's no conflict of saying, "Hey, I'm the mother here. I don't have to iron your shirt." No, she irons the shirt in a loving, caring
Yeah.
way, in a respectful way, because he tells her to hurry up. She tells him, "I'm working as fast as I can." There's no pushback or anything. It's just a normal exchange. Yes, the grandmother, Helen Martin, love her to death. Rest in
227, man.
rest in power.
227.
She, even though she's disapproving of the role, she's supportive of her family. And
Mhm.
she does it in a way where it's not so heavy handed. Yes, there is a scene where she says that essentially she doesn't care if he can hear
Mhm.
her, etc. But it's done in such a nurturing, caring way where, like you discussed in the pre-meeting, I don't know if we have that sense of community where my parents would see you doing maybe something wrong, or your parents would see me out there saying something that I shouldn't have said, and then not only them disciplining me, but saying, "Wait till I tell your parents," and then my parents being cool with it, not taking
Yeah.
offense to it, and recognizing the whole "it takes a village," and then in turn, that policing established a series of kinship, respect, the ability to want to do better. I don't think we
Yeah.
necessarily have that.
So that's a great point, and I have a question about that comes out of this. I also have to say that one of the things that I did not realize about this is that this is also co-written by Keenan Ivory Wayans.
Oh
So
yeah.
I mean, and then of course, Keenan Ivory Wayans, like a year before Robert Townsend makes Robert Townsend and his partners in crime, that's when A Living Color takes off. And
Mm-hmm.
think about all the people that In Living Color has given shine to. And I'm thinking like, I just watched Saturday Night Live and saw Jennifer Lopez on there, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember when Jennifer Lopez was a fly girl on there. So that there's just so many people that their career started from the genius of these two men working together and from the genius of Robert Townsend. Let's talk about the cake of the movie. A
Oh
couple
man.
things that we really dug. I'm just gonna give a couple of things that I really thought was great. One, there's a couple of lines that I thought were really relevant when he talks to the guy who makes the show, the Batty Show thing,
Oh.
and and the guy says, "Yo, it's not about art. It's about sequel."
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that he conveys that, I mean, like, that's what we see now. Everything is like, how can I get the sequel? Even like you and I have talked about, we go to movies and it feels like they're trying to sell you the next movie that's going
Mm-hmm.
to come out. Like they don't even finish the story of this movie because the next one's going to come out, and just how that becomes like what people are shooting for. So I thought that was a really fun line. Um, Cake wise, yo, I love the Speed and Tyrone that we talked about from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. Yo, the clip for the movie Attack of the Street Pimps is hilarious. Like, let's just be real. That's hilarious. That is a hilarious thing, man. If you have never seen it, just watch that thing. It's hilarious.
Oh
Um,
man.
Yo,
Yeah.
I like the PI skit Sam Ace because like
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
remember I remember like when those shows used to come on at night and it would be the always a detective show. Like when we were growing up, it was Kojak. Kojak was always on and Columbo. It was
Uh,
always like at night, those shows coming on, the detective show. It's just great. And then the last thing is I love the scene when he goes back, that the imagination of him going back to the hot dog stand as a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
celebrity and like just how broken down all the people that used to work the hot dog stand. That's my cake. And those are some of the scenes that were just funny to me.
Well, just piggybacking off of that, I want to hearken to some of the things you mentioned. One is I don't know where it was, but they used the Attack of the Zombie Pimps type scene in a couple of rap videos that I just can't remember the name, but I just
Mhm.
distinctly remember that scene. Uh, for me, it was Mike Hammer starring Stacy Keach on
Oh, I remember
CBS.
Mike Hammer.
That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
the
Yep,
detective thing
yep.
where it kind of like led me down that parallel. Um, you mentioned what was it? It was in my head. Oh man, what was the scene? Oh, you mentioned about A Living Color coming out, I think 86. So
Yeah. Mhm.
87 is also I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, starring Keenan Ivory Wayans.
Right.
So when he does the skits in between these three films during that 1 to 2 year period, some of the things you see is the Jerry Curl activator scene, which is one of the things
Yeah.
that is funny to me. Is hair shriveling. Like
Yeah,
for
and the Sam
those,
Mace joint.
yeah.
Hilarious. Yeah.
So if people can remember, like you had to stay with an activator. So like
Mhm.
the thing was, it looked wet, but it was dry, a la Dion, Dion
Mhm.
Sanders, that is. So that was really funny for me. But the overall thing that I'm getting out of that is, I like the movie within the movie. So
Mm.
traditionally, when you have the movie within the movie, you'll have someone who's playing a character, and then in real life, they're being filmed. And occasionally they might break the fourth wall. But here, you'll have daydream sequences of him about to play a character while he's playing himself in an autobiographical. Like that's triple, quadruple entendre, if you will, if you want to
Mhm.
make the allusion to. So I
Mhm.
love that aspect of him and the funny commercials, which is a perfect segue to what I think is the most hilarious thing in this whole movie is him breaking into the British character voice as a butler in a
Oh
slave
yeah.
film. And
That's great.
he calls it a school, and everybody, the ensemble cast that he worked with in improv and along the way and all these other additional shows that he was in, like they all come together, and that for me was hilarious. Even where you see like people you wouldn't expect giving jive, quote unquote, jive lessons or how to
Mhm.
dance, or they don't have rhythm, but they're showing you how to have like the the satire is so palpable you could cut it with a knife. Um,
Yeah.
Again, the cast, major kudos to bring out the weigh-ins, even though it's only three of them this time, Kim, Damon, and Keenan. You can still see the influences that they would
Absolutely.
later bring to the forefront of their own individual careers, and how they still partnered with each other in things like Meteor Man or in Living Color or whatever have you. Um, and finally, the last thing for me, of course, besides the cast, besides the movie within the movie, is the various themes that we've touched upon and that we'll continue to touch upon in the latter half of this here show.
Got it. Got it. And then there's a couple things on the hate side, a couple things I didn't like. It's not really a lot. It's actually just one thing. At the end, so I like how the movie flows, and I do like the skit scenes in the middle.
Yeah,
Um, the last one though, where he just kind of when he's in bed and he just dreams of all the little
yeah,
things, like him winning the Academy
yeah, yeah.
Award and the Superman skit and
Hmm.
the King Lear joint. I just don't
Yeah.
like that. It to me it just felt like they were like, dang, this movie is like 72 minutes. And we needed to get to 76. Let's just throwing 2 minutes, throwing 4 minutes to the 4 minutes
Hoping it
of the
sticks to the wall.
yeah, of those 4 minutes of those scenes that we didn't use. Just throw that in. And then at the end, the rap song at the end, I just don't like that either, man. That was just too much. Like you talked about this a little bit last week with Black Panther.
Mhm.
Sometimes you want to go to the movies, you don't necessarily want to be hit over the head with a message.
Yeah.
This one is like, yo, don't be a NIGGR, right? It hits you over the head with it. And it's like, I get it. I got it. Like, you don't have to do a rap at the end of the movie to tell me that. I got the message. I got the
Mhm.
point. It was just excessive. So that's my things that I didn't like.
I think the only thing in this movie I didn't like, and maybe it's just because I've never really been comfortable with it, is the so-called jive talk.
Mhm.
Other than that, this movie is perfect for me. And the reason why I say I don't like the jive talk, I guess, is because it does bring me back to a period in which there appeared to be too many stereotypes about who we are.
Mhm.
Platform shoes, butterfly collars, Cadillacs. Like, not every person could afford a Cadillac. Not every person wanted to dress in a zoot suit. Not every person wanted to go dancing or whatever have you. You do have uh, post office workers, barbershops, accountants, doctors, all living in the same neighborhood, um,
Mhm.
where they were just professional blue collar workers, some even white collar workers. So the fact that they emphasize this trope of the pimp slick hustler, and the way he talks, like, that's the part that kind of irked me, like, my
Yeah.
main man, like those things.
It's painful. It's
Yeah,
painful to watch, and it's
yes,
like, even to this day, knowing that the scene is gonna happen where he has to
yeah,
do that, and
yeah,
his family there, you know it's gonna happen, and it's still
mhm,
painful to watch it. Because the other thing is that you know that that's real.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
somebody had to do that in order to feed their family if they
mhm,
wanna be an actor, you know? So
yeah,
that's like that's a painful thing, man, and, unfortunately, it's a real thing as
mhm,
well. So I got a couple questions, and these are some of these are like in movie questions, and some of these are maybe outside, a little bit more existential questions. I'm going to start with like an in movie question. So at the end of the movie, Bobby is doing a commercial for the post office because,
okay,
as you know, there's always work at the post office, which
mhm.
is why this episode is called "There's Work at the Post Office."
Famous line
Do
by
you think?
Helen Martin.
Right? Do you think in the end that Bobby Taylor actually becomes an actor like in movies?
um So that scene where he's actually at the end smiling, posing in a government job, because that was the thing. You got to get yourself benefits, got to get a government
Mhm.
job. And Biggie kind of updated it with "Don't be mad, UPS is hiring."
Mhm.
I'm looking at, like, man, this is a safe space for him. It's a reliable check and it's reputable, so there's nothing really, no downside to it. But then I'm like, man, this dude listened to his uncle tell him. Essentially, a part of him died when he started listening to everyone else and stopped
Mhm.
listening to himself and chasing his dreams. So I'd like to think that Bobby really internalized that message. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to give this my all until the wheels fall off. And I'm going to stick with this acting thing.
Yeah. I'd like to believe that too, and I'd like to believe that the real Robert Townsend is what Bobby Taylor actually becomes in the
Yes.
end all. He actually has Robert Townsend's career. Which, by the way, Robert Townsend is still acting now. He's playing he's in The Bear. He plays the father of the
Hmm.
sister who won the Emmy Award and was just on Saturday Night Live with not Janet Jackson, Jennifer Lopez. So she was just on there. I'm gonna get her name here in a
Oh,
second.
that's what it is. Shout out to the cast of In Living Color, from Jamie Foxx. Glad to see that he's doing well, all the way to Jim Carrey. Ah, man, like they've really had some tentpole individuals. Of course, the Wayans, all the way from
Mhm.
Marlon and Sean, who was a DJ at one point, and then they go on to have their own sitcom. Um,
Mhm.
just major props to all the individuals who showcased their talents on there, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I got two questions. So one of the things that's really significant in this movie is that as he gets to the end, after Bobby Taylor has gotten the part,
Hmm.
he has this feeling of shame about the role that he's going to be playing,
Right,
and he
right.
imagines this situation where the NAACP is actually boycotting him for playing this role, right? And Paul Mooney is in that scene, and
Yeah, shout out to Paul Mooney. Rest in power.
as he as he always is, right? My question is, do from your perspective, when we think about what people are willing to produce,
Mm.
is there shame anymore in what people produce I guess really when you're talking about television, movies, or maybe social media.
You know how ironic it is that you proposed this question? I just watched a little skit blurb, I don't know what you call it anymore, short, with Candace Owens speaking to the fact of um, Ice Spice's song. Um,
Hmm.
I forget the
You
title.
think you think you the yeah stuff, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
really
yeah,
you're not even a fart. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is what passes for music nowadays. So I can hear the
Mhm.
condemnation in people saying, "Yo, remember what C. Dolores Tucker was saying?" And now this is the great
Mm.
grandchild of that. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like we went
Mm.
from being investigative reporters talking about that where NWA wasn't the norm. Not everybody wanted to be hard or a gangster. Like you had diversity. You could have literally a cool Keith talking about some astronomical space P funk, like just out of this world type stuff. You had the Daisy Lovers and De La. You know, everybody wanted to be different. If you were biting, you were whack.
Mhm.
Now we have these individuals who all want to be the same clone version, which the Roots said, don't be a clone. Now you got
Mhm.
these clones out there who are automatons and they just spit the same thing. And then the people, the masses, the powers that be try to convince you that that joint is dope, that that is
Yeah.
groundbreaking. I say that that buildup is to say this. One, there's no way that this movie could be made again, even though I want to see it made again. And the reason why is individuals pride themselves too much on just getting clicks. The whole, you know, any type of publicity is good publicity. So there
Mm.
is no so there is no shame. The in fact, I would argue the more degrading, the more outlandish, the more self-depreciation, the buffoonery that you can put out there, the more people like it.
Yeah, that's really what that gets to bamboozled, right?
Yeah.
That's really kind of what's there. It's really interesting because like they say that like there's three kind of cultures that societies are under. Like there's shame culture, there's
Mhm.
fear culture, and then there's like a pain culture. Or maybe I'm wrong about the pain part, but shame culture is basically saying that people's behavior is influenced by not wanting to be embarrassed in the
Mhm.
face of other people whose opinions they value.
Mhm.
In this movie, Bobby Taylor does not want to be an embarrassment to black people vis-a-vis the NAACP. And he
Mhm.
doesn't want to be an embarrassment to his family.
Mhm.
So that shapes what decisions he makes. That's like evidence of shame culture, right? Now, nowadays, they say like American society is marking the idea of fear culture, and fear culture being more along the lines of your behavior is controlled by what kind of repercussion will happen from
Mhm.
what you're doing. So if I'm going to be punished for something, then I won't do it.
Mhm.
Well, there isn't a punishment for that because, like you said, we're in a world now where so much is really based on just people liking something that there isn't really a consequence for something, and it's really we're not even in that time where people are going to take your record out. There's not even records to
Mhm.
take out and burn or stomp. That even like that kind of protest is not even real. You can't even do it because of the way that people get things. So it is unfortunate. I agree. I don't think that shame, we're definitely not in a shame culture. And I don't think in mass people really experience it, which is why I think you see a lot of the behaviors that you do, which unfortunately, maybe there does need to be a modern day Hollywood shuffle. Maybe it needs to be called, social media swipe or something, but something that gets to the heart of
Mm.
why are we chasing these ideas of like presenting ourselves in certain ways to get likes or to get attention or maybe to get certain monetization.
Well, think about
I don't
that.
know.
The word that we used was likes. That's the ironic part. You don't necessarily like it, but it serves a purpose of an entertainment value, so you check that box that you like it, even though you don't like it. The other thing to that is like I even said it again, like
You just said
even
like, yeah.
the thing that is ironic along those same lines is the sense of, hey, there are no checks and balances, is what we're speaking to, where you're holding yourself accountable. And this word is kind of like found itself at the forefront of a lot of discussions, whether it be how individuals relate to one another, whether it be husband and wife, girlfriend and boyfriend, the dating culture, or even just sports, where we talk about the name in the front is more important than the name of the back. And
Hmm.
that topic that you speak of, where Bobby is so concerned about the NAACP, where it permeates through his dreams and it
Hmm.
manifests itself in him being very critical of his acting ability in front of his girlfriend, Anne Marie Johnson. Shout out to her,
Hmm.
his grandmother, and his brother. Where those things you don't think they exist anymore because you're so much like it's all about me, and then I'm not looking into the future where you'll have these individuals who are doing OF or who are uh, I'm trying to find a more diplomatic way of saying these
Yeah, I
things.
got you. I understand.
Um, who are revealing themselves in a very provocative manner in a certain facility. Um,
Right.
they
That was really, really well done there. That was really well done. It's really
where
well done how you
I
put that.
appreciate that. Where they don't think, oh, in 10 years, I may have a child, and they may be scrolling through, happen to see
Yeah.
some old stuff, which is kind of why a certain family of sisters who are known to um, date individuals, why they were very concerned about a certain video coming to light again, and they were
Hmm.
making a concentrated effort to squash that before it became something more, because that's all about repercussions. And I think
Yeah.
this movie does a great job of emphasizing that point in a very shrewd manner, where it doesn't beat you in the head, but it does so in a way where you are reminded, like, don't do that. That
Yeah.
might come
Because
back to bite you.
there's consequences for the
Yeah.
behaviors,
Hmm.
and it's interesting. You can't have hyper individualization and shame at the same time,
Oh no, of
because
course not.
when everybody believes they are the end all be all, who can you really be accountable to? So
No
I
doubt.
definitely agree with you on that. So here's my last question about this movie, and this is one that I thought about a little bit, and I'm curious for your perspective on it. So how relevant is this movie in 2024?
Oh
And
man.
and the reason why I'm posing that question is because, at this time, there weren't a lot of roles, and there
Hmm.
wasn't the width and the depth of expression, certainly in movies that we have today, right?
Right.
Like you said, like, you mentioned Tyler Perry in the beginning of the show.
Mhm.
Tyler Perry he has his own studio now,
Studio.
home production
Mhm,
studio.
mhm.
He can make his own movies, right? You see 50 Cent is like has, single-handedly kept stars alive through the
Yeah.
Power series, right?
Whew.
So he
And
he's
BMF.
like, right. So he's doing that. So, increasingly black people are, to your point earlier, more behind the scenes as well as behind the cameras as well as in front of the cameras. Is it possible that this movie is not, I don't, outdated is probably not the right word, but is it still as relevant of a story of what the world of film looks like today as it was before?
I think this is your favorite rapper and arguably definitely my number 5, maybe even number 4, always says that no idea is original. So, with
Hmm.
that being said, what we have now is nothing more than a remake of a remake of a remake of a remix. We didn't
Hmm.
even get to the original yet. And by that I mean this movie does an excellent job of not only highlighting unsung heroes like a Grand L. Bush, who we talked about in Die Hard, who would later show up in things like Lethal Weapon 1 and 2, but it does a
Hmm.
great job of highlighting his forebearers, a la John Witherspoon, rest in peace, who I don't even have to tell anybody, but anything from Boondocks to Friday to Boomerang, you name it, he's been in it.
Classic.
So
Legendary. Yeah,
so
legend.
so that's a way of giving back. It's a way of melding all generations. It's a way of spotlighting, hey, you know what? We don't necessarily have to have the billion-dollar movie, but this is still a classic that will be timeless and shown throughout perpetuity. With that
Hmm.
being said, it'll be difficult to do what we do without this movie, but it'll be even more difficult if we don't continue to have movies like this. Um, you have an amalgamation of individuals behind the scenes, in front of the camera. You have someone who wrote in tandem with his brother uh, a project which started out as a labor of love that was supplemented by other jobs that he did simultaneously in 87. So
Hmm.
Robert Townsend would go on tour, he'd do comedic roles, he would do stand up, and then he would also do major films that would help to bring in additional income, because it wasn't just the 40 that everybody talks about, oh, he put it on his credit card. It wasn't just that. They still had to bring in money because there was
Another
still a
60,
goal.
right?
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that didn't just appear out of osmosis. Like they had to do something to bring that about. Simultaneously, we're talking about um, individuals coming together as a collective. So whether it's the Wu or a host of Southern artists from Ti to Outkast, basically selling stuff out of their trunk, mixtapes, whatever have you, to get their name out there, to get their buzz out there. Um, you know, I draw the parallel because it's still entertainment. When they did Rapper's Delight, you just had individuals who were out on the street corner just doing their thing, and they weren't necessarily into it for getting paid. They were into it for the love of the art. And Robert
Yeah.
Townsend shows that in this movie, where it's about his labor of love and his devotion, where he's respectable to the craft for the sake of it, because he remembers, you know, uh, individuals like, oh man, I'm I see her face in my name. Hallie, no, not Hallie. Uh, what's the name of the lady who won the first Academy Award for supporting actress? Was known for being depicting all the big mama roles, where she would have, like, she was in
So,
Gone with the Wind. Haley McDaniels. So
that's what I Hattie.
Hattie
I was at
McDaniels. Yeah,
Hattie. Yeah,
yeah.
Hattie McDaniel. Yeah.
So he remains true to that because, like you said earlier, there's individuals who did work that they didn't necessarily want to do. You know what I mean? Like nobody wants to do, shucking and jiving, or go and fetch it. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to do these things, but they understood that there was a bigger purpose, that I may not get there in my lifetime, which is something that some for those that watched uh, animation, the first Hokage in Naruto says, we'll leave it to future generations to continue our work. And I think that's the part where we miss, where, we'll say like, oh, I can do it myself, the rugged individualism, whatever have you. Um, but this movie, to your question, um, it does a great job of showing that, as a collective, we can get there together. I think it's in the Five Heartbeats where they're like, individual fingers or something to that effect are dope, and they can do a lot, but as a fist, we can do a lot
Yeah.
more.
Five
So yeah,
finger fist. Yeah.
yeah. So it's the same thing here.
So that's I appreciate all that you said there. As a part of a continuum in a story, yeah, of course it is relevant. So yeah, okay, all right, that's good. That's my questions. That's what I got.
But that
That's
segues to
right,
my question for you, and that is, can you make it as an entertainer without compromising your principles?
man. It's I this is what I think. I think that's a great question. I think it depends a lot on what you define as making it.
Mm,
Because I earlier on you were saying something about, I think it was Ryan Leslie you were talking about. And Ryan
hmm
Leslie figured out, if I identify my niche market, my niche group that's going to really support me, right? My target audience, sorry, that really supports me, I can cultivate that, and I can, within that space, be extremely successful. I can make it in
hmm
that sense. If I want to become more and more and more popular, and
hmm
more and more and more accessible, and more and more and more palatable, then I don't see how you can do that without in some way making compromises on what
mm,
you're producing or what you're saying or what you're doing. I don't, there's something about the idea of mass appeal, that to be able to appeal to all the masses, you sort of have to figure out how to be as right in the middle on everything as possible.
mm,
And no one, no one really is like that in real life. And so people that are able to do that are people that are really able to play that game that way. I think that for all of us that decide to create anything that you put out for public consumption, you have to ask the question of who is this for, and how, and like, am I comfortable with reaching those people?
Mm.
So like, me, like, this is not like, me and you are not Cisco and Ebert, right? We're not the goal, no kidding, right? We're also not Speed and Tyrone, right? We're not, the goal is not necessarily a show on NBC talking about movies,
Mhm.
right? Right now. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, but that's not the goal. When we got started, it was like, hey, we wanted to do something to talk about movies that were important to us, that were talked about from a certain perspective that we thought resonated with people, right? And that's why we're doing it. If we get that, then we made it.
Mm.
So I think like making it, however you define making it, is going to decide how much you compromise. And if you're really focused on what you're making it is, and who your audience is reflects authentically who you are, I don't think you have to compromise.
Mm. I like that. And that's
And
a
I got to
perfect
go back,
that's
and
perfect.
I got to, thank you, and I got to go back and say, when you mentioned the No Ideas original, that's Nas, by the way. So that's Nas is like my favorite MC. You have him at number 4. I don't get that, but that's not here. That's neither here nor there. Maybe one day there'll be a Sticky Floors movie music podcast to get into that one, but we gonna move on to this popcorn for this movie. So all right, so popcorn boxes, we're rating it. I'm gonna go first. So I'm rating this at 3.5. I know that that's
Mm.
sacrilegious right now, but
Mm.
I'll just say that if somebody were to ask me like, hey, I want to watch something about the entertainment industry and how it engages, how Black people engage with it, I absolutely would tell them you got to start by watching this movie.
Mm.
I would actually say, yo, you got to watch this. I definitely tell them you got to watch Bamboozled. I definitely tell them you should see American Fiction, right? That being said, this is not necessarily one of my favorite movies, which is why it's at 3.5. So I think
Mm.
it's very important, and I would definitely refer other people to it. And to anybody listening or watching, absolutely go out and see it, because it's an important story. And as Mr. Will, I'm sorry, has so clearly articulated, it's relevant. Just not one of my favorites.
I
What you
dig it,
got
man.
on the what you got on the popcorn scale?
Oh man. Because of the impact that it's had on pretty much the past 30 years, what is it? 87? Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, almost what? Whoa. I'm not even doing it. 36 years, right? Either
I don't know.
way.
I'm not. This is not a math show. So I don't know. This is about movies, man. Not We ain't doing math. You're gonna make me pull a calculator out here on this. Just trying to do
Correction
that.
is 37 years. But the thing that really like intrigued me about this movie was how it was able to balance everything from having a strong voice that emphasizes something positive, something that was a little comedic, something that was a little, it had tidbits of action in there. Um, and it drew upon different influences, whether it was, your detective black and white show, your romance, your drama, um, you name it, rom com, all in one. I like the fact that it helped a lot of individuals jumpstart their career. I like the fact that
Absolutely.
these individuals still continued to work with each other. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that it paid homage to those that came before them and gave them a chance to maybe revitalize their career or to continue to put their face out there. So for me, I'm going with 5 boxes of popcorn.
I
Um,
figured that's where you're going.
yeah, definitely, man. Five
I
boxes
figured it.
all time. Like, you know how there's certain movies that you just gotta watch. This is one of the movies that you gotta watch.
Yeah, it's definitely on the high referral tip.
Yeah,
So I
definitely.
dig that. I dig that. All right, so let's just closing thoughts on this movie. I would just say that like there's this expression of Ubuntu, the idea of like me and we. And within this movie, we've talked about it a couple times, but just for the final time, the character that Robert Townsend is playing, Bobby Taylor, is never an individual.
Hmm.
He's connected to everyone in the world that he lives in, and the world is aware of his dreams.
Hmm.
So you mentioned in the beginning his mother ironing his shirt for his audition, right?
Mhm.
She supports him in it. He goes to see his girlfriend. She supports him with it. Even the people at the hot dog stand that hate on him, they
Mm.
know his goal is to be an actor.
Mhm.
When he gets the role, he becomes concerned about how all of these different people are going to view him
Right.
because he's connected to those people. So everything that he does, he feels like is a reflection of them. And that is like that's like the simplified kind of core principle idea of Ubuntu. I think one of the really strongest points of this is that he's never separated from his community, and as a result, he ultimately makes a decision that supports the community. And in that, he also then supports himself and still finds a way to continue his dream, but to do it with a classy and respectful way. So that's my quick thought about this movie and what you got for the people.
Oh man, that was very eloquent. I'm running with something similar along those lines, and it's the sense of commitment. Uh, he had a fortitude to continue to pursue his dreams, even though individuals near and dear to him said, uh, "Look at the only person you know that almost made it was your uncle, and now he's sweeping up hair." Um,
Mm-hmm.
so he used those individuals, a la Michael Jordan making up stuff about people, and even Shaq saying that he was, you know, uh, given some snide remark or whatever have you. These things that motivated him continue to be a source of inspiration as well, because
Mm-hmm.
it causes him to go and talk to his uncle, who gives him the familial advice of, hey, I failed only because I stopped listening to myself and I continued to listen to others, and their voices became louder while mine became diminished. But I was
Mm-hmm.
really happy and I was really alive when I was on stage. And I think that resonated so much with me, where we're here right now before you, giving you this message. If not for CJ, encouraging me to designate the time to, you know, take down notes or to revisit a movie, I'm pretty sure I would have been content about my day to day. So this is a reminder for me. Maybe that's why it resonates so much with me in that regard. Um, I think it also speaks to the sense of commitment with your family. Because the first thing he says in the scene is, "Hey, when I make it, we all make it." Even when he's
Yeah,
with his
yeah, yeah.
friends at the basketball court, his brother, his mom.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just think that, that sense of commitment and understanding your position in the world, because, you know, even though it's a quote unquote black movie, this is a movie that says, hey, there's a space for everyone. And I'm all for individuals being able to verbalize their experience, because, as a good friend of mine said, we all want to be loved, heard, and respected. And
Mm-hmm.
this movie kind of promotes, and I think that's why it also hits home with just people at large. So whether you're Vietnamese, or you are Irish, whatever it may be, or maybe you're bisexual, or you're handicapped. I think the commitment to following your path, your passions, your desires in a very constructive way is what this movie speaks about, because it talks about humanity as a whole from the black perspective. And I think that's what anyone wants to be when they put themselves out there or expose themselves. They want their individual culture, ethnicity, gender, orientation, whatever have you, to be heard and to be respected, not just, okay, yeah, you have your piece, now go sit in the corner.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the thoughts on Hollywood Shuffle. Once again, something that we both recommend. So if it's not something that you've heard, that if you've never heard of the movie, go see it. I watched it again on Amazon. That was how I was able to find it.
Oh,
So
okay.
I know it's available there for people that want to check it out. Um, Next week we will be continuing this discussion of Black movies for Black History Month, and we're actually going to be talking about Bamboozled. So we're actually
Mm,
going to do that one. So that's going to be a good show. I can't end this show without just saying this note. So before we taped this, as many of you know, Carl Weathers passed away.
yeah, yeah, former
And
Raider.
Carl Weathers, known by so many people as Apollo Creed, right? The first Creed. And really just like one of those people who created a character that resonated so much with so many people and was so important. For us in this show, the first movie that we did was Creed 2.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what we talked about was Creed 2 was so important because it was the continuation of the death of Apollo Creed in Rocky 4. So you could almost draw a direct line from Rocky 4 to Creed 2, and how traumatic it was as a child to see Apollo Creed
Mm-hmm.
get killed because that character was so valuable and important. Obviously, he also was like Dylan in Predator,
You
and of
gotten
course he was
soft, Dylan.
and of course he was Action Jackson,
Woo!
and he played he was in the Mandalorian. I could
Mm-hmm.
never say his name right, so I'm not gonna say that character's name right there. But that was just he created so many things that so many people loved, and I know that for both of us, we loved it as well. So I definitely want to give a shout out to him and his family as well. Will, as you always say, your rest in power to Carl Weathers, man, because he did his work. And we're going to continue to do our work. Next week, we'll be back talking about Bamboozled. The Sticky Forest podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. We are also on YouTube. So please like, subscribe, comment. Your comments help us to do this better. And we will see you next week. Peace.